We're here today recording the interview of John Granata. This interview is being conducted by Eric Whitty and Adrian Dakota Hill from the Wright State University Veterans Voices Project. This interview is being recorded at VFW Post 3283 in Huber Heights, Ohio. It is 3 p.m. on June 19th, 2014. Okay, John, let's start off. Where and when were you born?
I was born July 5th, 1988, actually at Wright Air Force Base here in Dayton.
Okay. So who are your parents and what were their occupations?
My mom, Tammy Granata, and my dad, Steve Granata. My mom actually was in the Air Force. She was a radiologist, and then later became a teacher and is now a principal at an elementary school. My dad was he was a supply troop. He was in the Air Force as well, and that's where they met. And now he travels around the country doing basketball exhibitions and motivational speaking in schools. So.
Okay, so they're both out of the Air Force now?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
At any time were you in the Air Force at the same time as your parents?
No.
No, they were out. Okay. Any siblings?
I have one sibling. It's my sister, Lindsay Granata. She's now married though, so Lindsay Lambert.
Okay. Did she ever serve in the military?
No.
Okay. What were you doing before you entered the service?
I just got out of high school when I was looking to go. I went for a semester to Sinclair Community College and then just decided I was not ready for college at that point and decided just to go in.
Okay. Where did you go to high school?
Bethel High School.
Okay. Okay. So, in which branch of the military did you serve?
The United States Air Force.
Okay. And you enlisted?
Yes.
So, why did you choose the Air Force?
Well, both my parents were in, as well as my grandpa, and instantly I knew, like, planes have been my life since I was a tiny little kid. All the air shows, everything like that, and I always knew that I wanted to be in the air flying.
Okay. So, when you enlisted, how long after you enlisted did you go to training?
It took me 6 months to get a guaranteed position for my job. So after I enlisted, it was a 6-month delayed enlistment program.
Okay. And where did you go for basic training?
Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas.
Okay. Do you recall your instructors?
Yeah.
What was basic training like? What were your instructors like?
Basic training was interesting. I already had grown up in a lot of the military lifestyle, so it wasn't that big of a shock for me. I thought it was actually going to be a lot worse, but it was kind of weird when I showed up. Our instructor at the first half of it was a female. Tell you what, whew, that lady could yell, and she would get in your face, and she would say all kinds of crazy stuff, and it was pretty crazy. Then we had a Staff Sergeant Paez. He was actually, from what he said, and whether the story is true or not, I don't know, but he was from Compton, big time. He knew everyone in gangs and stuff like that, tatted up. He was a hardcore dude, and he would let you have it. Oh my goodness. So, but learned a lot, and it was a good experience, and I made it through just fine. So.
Okay. And then after basic training, did you go to an MOS school?
Yeah, I had to go to a bunch of different schools actually. There in Lackland, I stayed for another month, had to go to basic aircrew training.
Okay.
Just to get the initial what it is to be a flyer and all that kind of stuff. After that, I went to Pensacola, Florida, had to go to water survival. Then I went to Washington State at Fairchild, and I went through SEER school. That was 2 months long. It was pretty intense. And then after that, I had to do 8 months at Little Rock, Arkansas, where I actually was, plane specific for a C-130 Loadmaster for flight school.
Okay. And so that was your MOS, was a Loadmaster on C-130s?
Mm-hmm. So 1 Alpha 2.
Okay. So you kind of talked about this a little bit, but how did you adapt to the military life? Things like the physical fitness, barracks, food, social life?
Man, physically, I just came out of high school. I was football, track, and basketball, so I was in shape. That wasn't a problem. That aspect wasn't as bad as I'm sure the some of the other branches were, but it was still taxing. You know, I found out that how far I could actually push my body and what I could do. Food, learn how to eat fast, really fast. Can't always take your time. And then socially, I've always been, a very big, social butterfly pretty much, where I'm very personable. I meet people easily, talk to people easily, and I've always been kind of in that leader mode where it's not hard to get people who, want to be friends and hang out with me, so.
Okay. So I think we missed this. When exactly did you enlist? What year?
2008.
2008. Okay. So why don't you give us just a quick rundown on your military service from, you've already gone over training, but after training until you got out.
Okay. After I finished flight school, about 2 months later, that I was at my actual duty station, I deployed for the first time. Went to Ali Salim Air Base in Kuwait. There we flew in and out of Iraq, mostly for that first deployment, not really Afghanistan much. Been everywhere, seen a lot. I mean, you name a country that is over in the Middle East, and I've been there. So, did time in Syria, Lebanon, Israel. We did some stuff, Egypt, a lot of Africa, and after that came home for only 3 months, and then got tasked to go again, and went back, and that's when we started everything started going on in Afghanistan pretty bad. So, we were flying there a lot.
Out of Kuwait or a base?
Out of Kuwait, what happened would be like we'd stage out of Kuwait, and then there'd be like Kandahar and Bagram, or even Manis in Kyrgyzstan, and we'd stay there for a couple weeks, fly missions for them, and then go to Kandahar for a few weeks, and then fly back, let the plane get fixed, all that kind of stuff, whatever needed to be done, and then fly back and do whatever we had to do. So, got to do a lot of interesting missions, from regular missing essential cargo to personnel, also combat airdrops, just a couple different things like that. So, got to do a lot of cool stuff, flying some Navy SEALs for a while, which was definitely an interesting time. And after that, came back, went to Germany for 3 months. Got to stage out of there for a while and flew all over Europe, which was a blast. Can't complain about that one. And pretty much other than that, I got back from Germany, and something was just going on weird with me. And one day I get back from a flight and had a full-blown seizure. And so went back, and obviously they didn't let me fly again. And come to find out, they gave me PTSD-related epilepsy. And so after that, I was medically retired in 2013.
Okay. So you had mentioned earlier that you participated in quite a few operations. So Iraqi Freedom, Enduring Freedom.
New Hope.
And what was New Hope?
Right when Obama said that, we're leaving Iraq, the drawdown, instead of it being still Iraqi Freedom, it now switched to New Hope, which was the taking people out and getting people home part of it.
I see.
And also, Horn of Africa.
Okay. What was Horn of Africa?
A lot of the stuff was just getting people supplies, and we would go to random villages in the middle of nowhere, drop off food, water, anything like that. So it was a lot of cargo for that one, not as much passengers or combat time. And then got to do some other things.
So would that be Somalia?
We weren't in Somalia.
Okay.
But we staged out of Djibouti, and we flew all over Kenya, Ethiopia, Uganda. Once again, you name it, we've been there.
Okay. And that was flying in food, humanitarian supplies?
Yes. For the most part.
Was that through the UN or the U.S.?
It was through the UN, technically, And then we would just, we had a couple different crews who were, we were with some British C-130s, some Australian C-130s, and we all worked together. But it was just pretty much one mission. So.
Okay. And when was that?
That was in 2011, the end of 2011 and 12. So.
Okay. Okay, so let's talk about first Iraqi freedom.
Okay.
Again, what time were you flying in and out of Iraq?
It was in late 2009, early 2010.
Okay.
So it was between those 2 years. Our first mission was actually the day before Thanksgiving. So that was interesting. First holiday missed. It's pretty much the time frame.
Okay. What were your missions like?
Long. We would do, our whole schedule was we do 24 hours on, 24 hours off, just continuously. Sometimes it'd be the complete opposite where we'd go for a week and be continuously flying and come back in 24 hours and right back to it. It just depends. Missions were interesting. Normally we called it the Baghdad shuffle, where we'd go Baghdad, back to Kuwait, Baghdad, back to Kuwait, Baghdad, Balad, and then Kirkuk, Mosul, and then back.
In one day?
In one day.
Oh, wow. So during that time, you were based out of an airfield in Kuwait, but you were flying and landing air bases?
It didn't matter. We've landed on a dirt strip for, marine fobs and stuff like that in the middle of nowhere and had to stay the night there. And so it was really anywhere that they needed us to drop cargo or pick people up, we were there.
So when you landed and had to spend the night at a forward base, who provided security for your plane?
We had our own security. If you could call it that. No, but they were good people. We had fast team members, what they were called. So they were Ravens. And they would have to stand by the airplane. But if there was nowhere we could go, then we all did security for the airplane.
So those guys, what would you say, were they Air Force personnel that would go ahead and secure an airfield? Or?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any kind of particularly interesting missions you flew into Iraq, or anything that sticks out?
We've done a couple of prisoner of war stuff. We called them pucks, where people would load up the plane, they'd have the hoods on, we'd chain them down to the ground and fly them wherever they needed to go. So for transport, that was fun. One of my favorite missions was in Iraq. My first time was the first time I ever had a lot of weaponry on my plane. I had 2 full pallets that were 10,000 pounds each of frag grenades, 105 shells for a AC-130 gunship that we were bringing to Bagram. That was stacked. We had just 2 gigantic pallets that were all just rounds it was so much fun. We had mortars, proximity mines. It was a legit mission. That was really fun. But I think throughout the whole course of my career, whenever I was flying overseas, we had a mission where, if say someone was to die, we'd go pick them up. We'd do a ceremony for them at whatever base they did, and we'd bring them to Kuwait International, not our base, where they'd be shipped over, where they'd be sent to Germany, and then sent to the States. So that was a proud mission. So even though it was hard to do sometimes and some crappy situations happened, it was definitely a moment for me where, you really got to sit there on a 5-hour flight back and think, about what we do for, our friends and families and the people who actually do, end up losing their lives. It's different. It's very emotional, very, I don't want to say like awakening moment when you actually you're faced with that kind of stuff.
So you said you guys would do the ceremony. Did you keep a set of dress uniforms? What was the ceremony that you would do?
The ceremony would be, what we do is, they'd have either, whether it be, in any situation, mostly it was a box with, a flag over top of it. And we'd set it up, we'd have our plane parked, and there'd just be a line of all his comrades and stuff like that. And what we'd do is we'd open the door, and we'd let their, leadership on and close the door. And we'd have to open it back up, and then we'd all get out while the 4 people, whoever the honor guard was, or their friends who wanted to carry the casket, they'd bring it on, we all salute, everyone would salute, and then we'd go in after that, after they put them down, and we'd close the door so no one could see. We strapped the casket down so it was properly secured, and then open it back up, and we'd sit there and stand by as everyone pretty much said their goodbyes and that kind of stuff, and then we'd take off.
Did you ever, did they fill up the plane, or was it one plane dedicated for one fallen service member, or?
It just depends. A lot of times it's based on how many people are in the area, who can do whatever, but it's happened where it's been 1, all the way up to 13 at the time. So.
Wow. Let's do this. Why don't you explain what a C-130 is for people who don't know?
C-130 is pretty much the second smallest cargo airplane in the Air Force fleet. It's has 4 prop engines. I flew C-130E, H, and J's. The J is the newest model and the fastest. Loved it. We fly low and slow. We don't have a problem landing anywhere. We don't deal with the actual engines, the turbine engines, so we don't have to deal with rocks or FOD or all that kind of stuff. We've landed on gravel, dirt, sand. Doesn't matter. It's the workhorse of the Air Force.
What's the smallest or hardest place you've ever landed?
Ooh, smallest place was this little field in Afghanistan called Shank, and it was a runway where if you didn't hit at the very front, then you instantly wouldn't be able to land. You'd have to do a touch and go, because if you waited too long, you couldn't make the climb grading because it was in the middle of the mountains in a valley, and so you had to land perfect, and then it was just a complete, not even break. It was a reverse and then break. So it was pretty cool. We got to do some fun stuff.
So just like how short of a runway and how long as the plane can you land?
Trying to remember the exact details.
Just to give people kind of an idea of what you're talking about.
The plane's 63 feet long, and a runway. I think we could probably do. I want to say we could probably land it in 4,000 feet. So very quick. Very, very quick.
And you said it was a cargo plane, so did it have any defensive guns, any armor?
Really had not very much armor except for in the doors and stuff like that where we would sit for calling out any type of surface to air missiles or small arms fire. Armor no, guns no, not for mine. Mine was a slick C-130, not like a gunship. All we pretty much had was flares when it came to defense systems.
And what do the flares do?
The flares are made for a heat-seeking missile, so if we get shot at, obviously it's going toward the engines, and the flares go out and they burn at 2,000 degrees, and it's pretty much squeeze your butt and pray that it bites off, and normally every time it worked. The C-130 hasn't been shot down since Vietnam, and so it bites off on the actual heat flare and then before it hits the airplane.
Was your plane ever shot at?
Yeah, multiple times.
Small arms, anti-aircraft?
Small arms, RPGs, SA-7, surface-to-air missiles. Oh yeah, AAA. We've been through it.
Wow. Okay. Anything else about Iraq?
Like story-wise?
Yeah, anything you wanna share, anything you think people need to know about?
Yeah, camel spiders are no fun. That's for sure. Um, well, pretty much it.
Okay. So you were in Iraq in 2008 or 2009 to 2010, and then you went to Afghanistan?
Yeah, and once again, we staged out of Kuwait, and then we just, because it was a very long flight from Kuwait there,
Okay.
and we do a lot of stuff going from, mostly Kandahar, because that's the main forward operating base for C-130s, and I mean they had everything, A-10s there, F-16s, drones. That's where the gunships were, and that was a good time.
So in a typical mission, you'd fly from your base in Kuwait to Kandahar, and then do small flights around
Yeah,
Afghanistan?
just short hops because they had a lot more in Afghanistan. They weren't as many, set bases where it was just, like Balad or Baghdad and all that kind of stuff around. Everyone there had a lot of actual set up bases, and for there it was mostly forward operating bases in Afghanistan. So we would go there, bring food, bring supplies, bring people back and forth, just to swap people out and whatever else we had to do.
So in a typical mission, you'd leave Kuwait, fly to Kandahar. How long would you spend in Afghanistan?
Sometimes, it was as little as 7, 8 hours. Sometimes it'd be a couple weeks.
Any particularly memorable missions in Afghanistan?
There's some, but do I have to?
Let's take a quick break for a second.
Sure. You good?
Okay, so we're back recording the interview of John Granata. All right, so we were talking about Operation Enduring Freedom. Were there any missions that you flew into Afghanistan that were particularly memorable?
Yeah, there are definitely a few. A couple of the really heavy casualty moments where we had to pick up a lot of people. That was definitely, something I'll never forget. Just having to deal with, just the knowledge of what was going on, just the idea of what was happening. Definitely when you close up an airplane and pressurize, the smell those were terrible moments. I'll never forget. Like, that's some of the worst nightmares I have to this day. Is just, waking up to a smell, and sometimes just that can set me off. Weather and stuff like that. It really makes me. There's a lot of things that bring up a lot of bad memories. One thing we did a good amount of medevac missions. I remember one in particular that I think meant the most to me, and definitely was the hardest that I never had to deal with before. There was a Marine who stepped on an IED, and he had a laceration from his ankle all the way up to his armpit. And they brought him on. We set up, the litter stanchions, and put him up there. And I still remember just sitting there looking at it, and they were pumping 4 IVs into him, trying to compensate for the amount of blood loss he was going through. And the one thing I've never seen is blood go through the bottom of a litter stanchion. And so that was hard, and it was just dripping onto the floor. And when we were going up, it was just rolling down. Then about 30 minutes into the flight nurse comes up to me, and she's like, "Hey, just so he's not. It's a 4-hour flight. He's maybe got 30 minutes, and he would want to talk to anybody. Will you go talk to him?" I'm like, "Oh yeah." I'm like, "Okay, that's cool." And he was he was a Texas boy, and so I sat down and talked to him, and we were talking for the whole time, and I was holding his hand, and he was just going off about his family and his kids and he just had, before he deployed, he found out that his wife was pregnant, and so he never got to meet his son. You know, he always was, he was just telling me how much he regretted that and how hard it's going to be, and, you know, things that he remembered about his whole life with his family. And it was just, it was a very humbling experience listening to that. And, you know, up until his last breath, that's all he talked about, was how much he loved his wife and how they met and how, you know, the things they've shared together and the things they've done. And once again, their 3 kids. It was very hard to know what was happening in the moment and be able to keep my composure, because I knew that, you know, he had it worse than I ever could imagine. And I had to sit there and be the strong person. And I had to do my best, and I had never dealt with a situation like that in my life. I've had family members die, but I've never, you know, been the one, you know, holding their hand as they're leaving kind of deal. It was very, very, very difficult. And, you know, he told me, hey, you know, I want my, you know, my family to know, you know, could you say something to somebody and just tell them, you know, what I've been saying, and just tell them I love them. And it was out of a movie, man. It was just,
So, so these units forward deployed in Afghanistan would call for a medevac, and they would you know ahead of time that you were having the mission?
nope, we could be in the middle of a mission and we'd have what's called a refrag, and it's just an instant change of mission. So it's like, hey, you're going here, now you're not, turn around, here's your heading, here's your coordinates, here's the place you're going now.
So you would never know ahead of time that you were going to do casualty evacuations?
Sometimes we would find out that we were doing that, but for the most part it was sporadic.
And then, so you'd pick up these casualties and fly them?
It just depends on the situation. If they were in, I mean, critical care, they have to get to a big, you know, hospital and have the opportunity. But, you know, for the most part, we would fly them if they were in the middle of nowhere. We'd fly them to Bagram where they could be treated. And if that didn't work and they needed, you know, somewhere, we'd take them from there to Kuwait International, and then they'd head to Germany. There was also, I think, a big hospital in Qatar. Been there a bunch of times. But for the most part, yeah, it just situation depending.
Okay. And did you have medical personnel on the plane with you? Or?
Oh yeah, the first thing we'd have to do is go pick up the medevac teams.
Okay.
And so there'd be a bunch of flight docs and flight nurses on there. And
So theoretically, you guys would fly the planes and they'd deal with the casualties, but that wasn't always the way it worked out.
Yeah, we didn't really, once they got on the plane, obviously for us, we had no, you know, nothing like them for medical stuff. And so for the most part, you know, they would help us out if we needed help, but for the most part, you know, if they needed anything, we were there. If they needed help, we were there. And, but for the most part, they, you know, took care of what they did. So.
Okay. Before we move on, any other missions that stand out in Afghanistan?
I had one. It was the longest day ever. We hit, normally it's a 16-hour duty day. And we get there, and they're like, we're about to go on approach and to land and be done. And they're like, hey, you've been refragged. We're like, oh, you serious? And they're like, you got 5 more hours. It's been approved by the Dermont 4, you're gone. Go. We're like, okay. And thank God for, I don't know if anyone else has experienced the rippets. Thank God for those.
Was that, well, first off, why don't you explain what that is?
A rippet is a knockoff energy drink that you could get in the desert. I mean, they have them here in the States, but they came in like little cans like this, and they were just hardcore energy drinks. And we would do what's called a Hell's Gate, and it's where you cut off with a knife the top of the rip it, and then drop a 5-hour energy shot in there and drink it. That'd keep you awake when you needed to be awake.
So do you think your command knew that was the only way you guys were staying operational, was taking caffeine drinks?
Well, they, like, for once we left for a mission, we'd bring our food, a cooler full of water, and then they'd give us like 4 cases of Riffits. So we had a lot of them. So, but. And then continue on with that story. I remember we were flying and the sun was just going down. And so as it got really dark, we put on our MVGs. I looked out in the distance to where the city was, and it was getting bombarded. It looked like it was a thunderstorm with the amount of, but you could just see planes flying in and out and just giant explosions everywhere. It was insane. And it would just, from that far of distance, I mean, I'm sure they were 100 miles away, but at the same time, like, it'd be so bright that it would drown out your night vision goggles. Wow. That was definitely an interesting view.
So, night vision, or night missions, you used night vision goggles. Did the plane have lights inside, outside?
They had lights. When you got to a certain point, you'd have to turn off everything, go dark. So we, couldn't be seen as much as possible, and we were just on full IR and MVG lighting. So we had lights on the plane, but you can't see them under the naked eye. If you have MVGs, it's bright. It's perfect. But if we just made sure all the lights on the plane were off, there were no lights on the outside of the plane anywhere. It was just flying in completely dark, which was definitely awesome. I remember actually going back to Iraq. I remember there was a mission where we were landing on a dirt strip again, and one of my buddies gets out, and at night it gets really cold. The difference between middle of the day at 1:30 and then going to 70 degrees, which doesn't sound cold, but that big of a drop, it's like you're in Antarctica. And so everything's attracted to the heat there. Well, one night, middle of nowhere, just sand around this little tiny crappy strip, I look out and my buddy's going to a Humvee to get the the air and different type of the wind and the weather and all that kind of stuff before we take off. And I look and he's walking that way, and there's just dozens of camel spiders just surrounding him. I can only see it. He doesn't know anything because he had his nogs up. I'm sitting there yelling, but you can't yell over the the prop blast and everything. And I'm like, man, this kid's about to die by a camel spider. And the nastiest part ever is when they get too close to the airplane, they'd get picked up and tossed over his head. Oh gosh, it was the most disgusting thing ever. And then once he finally got back to the plane, I was like, hey man, put down your nogs and look over there. And sure enough, he started freaking out. He's like, starts patting himself down, and oh man, we were all dying laughing. That was one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life.
That's good. Okay. So what was the name of the base in Kuwait again?
Ali Salim.
Okay. What was life like there when you weren't on missions?
Actually, it wasn't bad. It was a peacetime country, so we didn't have really a problem. Food sucked, but they had the nicest gym. They had like the last 4 years in a row they were ranked the nicest gym in the AOR, and so that was cool. Big basketball court, got to play intramural basketball. They had a pretty nice pool, but you could only sit out there for 10 minutes because you were toasted after that. And we were I mean, we had nice, it wasn't like dorm rooms, but it was like a barracks that each crew had 2 rooms, so officers and enlisted. And there was one other, because it was, you'd have on E's and H's, there were 3 officers and 3 enlisted. You had 2 loadmasters, engineer, and then a pilot, a co-pilot, and a navigator for that. But on J's, it was, you had 2 pilots and 1 or 2 loadmasters. That was it. So, but yeah, we'd each have our own rooms, and they weren't too bad. I can't complain. Kuwait was pretty nice. Kuwait was pretty cake compared to a couple places, you know, so I don't have any room to complain about the living circumstances at that place.
So what did you do during your off time?
I actually did a lot of college stuff while I was going, because, you know, with 24 hours, you can do a lot of stuff and you're bored. We had a pretty cool MWR that had pool tables and ping pong tables and stuff like that, and I would always be there doing something. So, doing that, not a lot of TV, nothing like that, but, you know, we have fun. I know the biggest, probably the most fun I've had was honestly at the smoke pit in the middle of the base, because all the guys, all the old guys would come, and, you know, that's when you've heard stories from other people, and you heard their experiences, and everyone's wanting to talk about what went on the other day, and that's when you actually learn a lot about your job, is when the people who have gone above you and have been through everything you've been through times like 10, you know, are able to sit there and talk, and you learn from their experiences in a peaceful situation where everyone's just trying to, you know, relax and let some stress go as best they can, you know, talk about their families, and that was probably the most memorable time that I have on my off time doing something. Other than that, sleeping was my deal.
How about friends? What kind of friends did you have overseas?
We had we all deployed as a unit each time.
Your squadron?
My squadron, Dice Air Force Base. We were the 40th Airlift Squadron. We would always fly together. We'd go over, and we were at Dias. We had the 39th and the 40th, both airlift squadrons, but 2 different. We'd rotate, so every time we flew out, they were coming in. Every time we went in, they went out. And so we all got pretty close. I mean, it was a small squadron. It wasn't anything big.
About how many people?
There was probably about 120 people, and so, I mean, less than half of that was enlisted, actually doing, you know, loadmaster. My first deployment flew with a guy, his name is Robert Gantz. Great guy, smart. He won Loadmaster of the Year for the Numbered Air Force. I mean, just an awesome dude. And he taught me a lot. But all my friends that I went through all of flight school, who were going to Dias, you know, we all got close before we even showed up. And so I knew a good amount of people there. Made a lot of good friends with the FAST team members, so a lot of the security forces guy we got to know pretty well. And because, you know, everyone was like, hey, if you go to Jordan, can you bring us back something? Or, hey, if you go here, you know, what do you think about this? And so we would have a lot of fun with that. But I mean, I had a lot of, I relied on my friends as they did us and me. So for a lot of support when you deal with something you never dealt with, you know, you got to vent it, and you can't obviously vent to your family. And, you know, a lot of people don't understand that, because not only is it hard for, like, your family or your girlfriend or whoever, because one, they know they have to be strong for you, because, you know, the last thing they want to do is bring problems to you and stress you out more than you already are, and then you don't want to make it sound like things are going bad where you're at and tell them the things that you've been through. So, you know, you need those people around you who are your support, and you know, are able to go either you know, it's okay, relax, just calm down, or, you know, the opposite end of the spectrum. So, yeah.
So speaking of family, how How did you keep in touch with your family?
I got to call, every week or so. I got to call my mom or, call my girlfriend, stuff like that. Um, Luckily, Kuwait did have Wi-Fi, so we were able to, get on and, Facebook and Skype and stuff like that. So it was good.
So do you think that being able to keep in touch with your family helped, or?
Oh, it definitely helped. It definitely helped. I actually got to get, while I was overseas, one of my family members died. They Skyped me into the funeral.
Oh, wow.
And that meant a lot. Even though I wasn't, there, I felt there. I felt like I had a little bit of more closure than I did and stuff like that. And so in ways it definitely helped, but sometimes it was just like, I need to be left alone. Like I can't put them in my head. I need to, deal with my stuff on my own. And so a lot of times, I would avoid getting on computers or doing that kind of stuff because I needed to stay focused in certain times. So.
Okay. You had mentioned earlier an air show?
Yeah. It was my first deployment, and we were about 3.5 months in, and our crew got picked out of everyone in the AOR, every C-130 crew, to do a international air show in Bahrain. And it's a little tiny island outside of Qatar, and really rich country though. Really rich country. And so it was very interesting. We were there for a week, and we would land, and we got put in like a gated area, and for protection wise, and obviously a lot of security was there. There was a C-5, a C-121, F-A-18, F-16, and an A-10 that were all with us together. So it was cool kind of getting to go on the planes and look at them, and they would come to us, but it was different having all the different types. There was not a country that didn't show up. Syria was there, anyone that we were having conflicts with were there. It was very interesting, and they all would put on different air shows with their best pilots and best planes kind of deal, and so it was interesting. They had one where our F-16 and a Syrian MiG actually got to fly together.
Oh, wow.
You could tell, like from a normal perspective, people would be like, "Oh my God, planes!" But you could tell that they were feeling each other out.
Yeah, there was a little competition.
There was a little dogfight going on. Oh yeah, and so it was very interesting and very unsettling at times because obviously you have different reporters coming in who are not from America. We had the king of Bahrain come to our airplane. It was definitely interesting. So it was a good time, but got to do a lot of stuff. The country was fun. The money situation was not.
How so?
We went to the mall, and we're gonna get some food, and I went to the ATM because I needed their money, and so I took out 100 of their money, and I looked at my bank account the next day, and $336 were gone. It was that big of a money difference. So it was like 3 to 1. It was ridiculous. I was like, oh, expensive. So, and it was still like 20-something dollars of their money to get like a decent hamburger or steak or whatever.
Oh, wow. So while you were deployed, did you ever get leave? Did you get a chance to go home during deployments or just in between?
Just in between.
Other than the air show, did you ever get time off that you could go off base?
In Africa, we got a little bit of time. We went a couple different places. I know the greatest part about a C-130 is it breaks. And we get lucky enough sometimes to break in some really nice places. Like we broke in Kenya, and we were there for 7 days, and we sadly, there was only one embassy-approved place, and that was a 5-star White Sands resort. And they didn't have any rooms available. And we're like, oh, what do we do? And they're like, well, we need to put you in our 2 presidential suites. That was a good time. And there it was the complete opposite. You know, you gave somebody $1, you could get like 5 beers off that. And so we had a lot of fun there. That was a really good time. And then Germany, once I was there, I got to go to different places, visit a couple castles, got to do some actual sightseeing. When we were in Italy, we were doing paratroop drops with the British, and
So British paratroopers were jumping out of your plane?
yeah, and then some of our guys were jumping out of their planes, and so it was a joint task, you know, air base. In Italy, it was in Pordenone, and that was a lot of fun. But one of our planes broke, and then we only had one left, and then one of the doors broke. So now there's only one door that people could jump out of. And so we had to stay a couple extra days, and because I was just there TDY helping out, I got to go do my own thing for 3-4 days. Went to Venice, Rome. It was definitely a nice little travel experience.
Nice.
No, but when we were actually in the desert, not a lot. When it came to going off base, and then yeah, pretty much we would stay on base wherever we were at. So Jordan was nice.
Okay. So before we move on to getting out of the military, anything else about your deployments or your time in the military that?
Not that I can think of specifically.
Okay.
There's like so much stuff.
Well, if you think of something, we can throw it in out of order. So you were, refresh my memory, you were deployed and you had a medical issue?
Yeah. I came back, and every so often it started out where it was weird. I would be walking, and I just lose muscle control and fall over. And it started as that, and then one time I was walking up my stairs to my apartment, and I was walking up with groceries. Right when I was about to open my door, I had a full-blown seizure. And then it just started happening all the time. I was having like 5 to 10 little ones a day, and then a big one a week. And they had no clue what it was. They didn't know if it was heart problems, and then finally they found out after a little while. It took them about 3 months. Like, oh, you have epilepsy. And like, oh, interesting. That's the first thing you said, but you didn't want to pursue it. But okay. And so they put me on medication for that, and I've been on that since then, and it's been a struggle.
So was your contract up, or did they give you a medical discharge? What kind of?
They gave me a medical discharge, and man, that was the hardest thing ever. I remember when, the doctor came in, the flight doc, and he actually looked me in the eyes and said, "Hey, man, before I say this, I want to bring, your commander in here. He wants to talk to you." And right then I knew it was bad. And he came in and he was like, "I want to be the one to tell you." He's like, we can't ever let you fly again. And I remember just sitting there crying, because that was my life. That's what I did. That was the one thing in my life that I've done that I've ever been proud of, was just doing what I did. And having someone tell you it's being taken away, and then telling me I can't stay in the military, and wanting to make it a career, and having such a fast, I was skyrocketing through ranks. And, I was excelling at everything, and I had made huge, huge gains, and then it's just in a second gone. And having to sit there and listen to that, and then, think about how, 2 months later, my whole unit left for deployment, and I wasn't there, you know, one of my best friends ended up having to fill my spot. And it was just like, it sucked. Because it wasn't even about the mission, it was about the people at that point in time. You know, I felt like I let myself down, I let them down. You know, I couldn't be there to help and protect people because, I mean, I was good at what I did. And I took pride that I was that good at what I did. You know, not too many people, you know, who are, you know, 21 can handle having control over a $40 million airplane with every day, every flight, 72, you know, passengers that you're in charge of, making sure that they get wherever they have to do safe. And, you know, it sucked getting out. And then I had to wait around for a year. It took that long just to get me out processed and get me finished because of all the crap that they had to go through, and they had to make sure that I was on 6 months worth of medicine, got me 6 months in a row stable, that kind of stuff. So I was sitting there, you know, doing office duties for a year. It was the hardest thing, man.
So when you finally got to come home, what was that like?
I hated it at first. I got back. I was actually engaged, and then I started, you know, really understanding what was going on with me and stuff like that, and you know, started having actual issues. I definitely didn't do well with old friends. Had a really hard time adjusting for a long time, and ended up, because of that, you know, whether it's me or not, I, you know, pushed my fiance far away enough where she left, and it was just, for a while, it was a pretty big downward spiral. And it took me a little while to get back to figuring out, you know, what I wanted to do, and, you know, kind of like who I was, because my identity was always the military. You know, I was a C-130 Globemaster. You asked me who I was, my name wasn't John. I was a U.S. Air Force Airman, and I flew C-130s. That was me. And now it's, oh, you have to find something new to do. It was like, what do I want to do? I fly for a living. Riding a desk isn't my view of, you know, what I want to do. And coming to terms with that was the hardest part.
What have you done to come to terms with it?
You know, it took a lot of help. The biggest thing was I joined the VFW here, and being able to actually talk about my problems and being able to talk about situations to people and, you know, get things off my chest, because holding them in just made me angry and angrier and angrier and angrier until finally I would just blow up one time. And then, but being around these people, you know, who really wanted to make sure that I was okay, feeling that camaraderie again, feeling that feeling of family all together, helping each other out no matter what I needed, they were there for me. You know, when I was struggling, even if it was, I came here and drank too much, they would never for a second give me my keys. They were like, one, you can sleep in the back, or you can come home, or we'll take you home. One of those type things. I mean, it was just, I had a feeling like, you know, I was part of something again. So, and then it just took time, obviously, you know, medication and stuff like that helped, and, you know, just starting to learn that it's over. Trying to get the fact that, you know, what I did I can still be proud of. You know, for the rest of my life, I know what I did. And, you know, realizing that, you know, it's not all bad, because you never know what could have happened on the next deployment. I mean, you never can really say, you know, if I would have went again, what would have happened or what could have happened. So at the same time, you know, I have to be thankful. And it just took me trying to come to terms in that area the most, I think. So.
So what are you doing now?
I go to school. I go to Wright State. I'm organizational leadership major. Plan on right after that going to business management for my master's. I work for actually the Wright State Veterans Military Center. I'm the community outreach coordinator, which is a lot of fun. Get to plan events and do all kinds of stuff and try to, connect with veterans and bring them together so they can also feel that community that I missed when I got out. And I think even though, yes, I'm flying a desk pretty much, I still get the feeling like I'm doing something important because I know how it was when I got back, and I didn't go through half the stuff that a lot of people, have gone through, and I respect the crap out of that. But I want to be the one who helps them through everything, and even if it's just something as little as a picnic, because it was Dr. Gordon, Seth Gordon, who is the director. He said if we have an event and we spend a bunch of money and only 2 new people show up and meet, it's a win. You know what I mean? Just provide that, feeling that you're not alone.
Okay. So a couple just general reflections. How did your experience in a combat zone affect your life?
I think the worst part was, first deployment wasn't bad, to be honest with you. It was interesting, it was different, definitely being in a combat zone and, having situations come about. But the first one wasn't that bad. The second one was the worst. That's when I started to feel like I was losing, emotions. And I became very desensitized to, feelings and stuff like that. Like dealing with family and stuff, it's like, I still to this day sometimes get just so mad. Like people are sitting there crying about the lamest stuff ever, and I just get angry. And it's like, really? Your life is not that bad. And I think that's why it's affected me, in terms of family and friends and stuff. And I've lost a lot of friends over that because I just don't understand. I don't get it anymore. And then, there's times where, I've got a lot of anger issues now that I'm dealing with, and, some certain stuff like that where it's just kind of like a ticking time bomb every so often. But for the most part, it was that. It was just seeing things and just getting angry. And, it wasn't angry at anybody in specific, I guess, that I could say. I've had to make some judgment calls that I didn't want to do, but, it's them or me or them or the person next to me, and I had to. And, that stuff never leaves your mind. Worst part is sleep for me now, just because, I don't know, ever since I got back, it was just, I don't sleep, I get a lot of nightmares when I do every so often, and, so it's definitely affected me. It's definitely, changed who I am as a person and changed how I look at, the normal, everyday life, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes. Has your service overseas impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
Here's my take on it. Since the beginning of time, war has been, something that it has to happen sometimes. Do I like it? No. Does it need to happen sometimes? Yes. If, people are doing the wrong thing, you can't just let it happen. You gotta go do something. But for me, even if I didn't agree with what we were doing, I made it where it wasn't about the officers appointed over me anymore. It was that person next to me. I did it for them every single day. I followed orders. That's exactly what I did. Just like I said I would, just like I was supposed to when I signed that dotted line. But when it came to in the moment, that's all I thought about.
So, what kind of life lessons did you learn from your service?
I learned, I think one of the biggest life lessons, other than, you can talk about, oh, I learned integrity, but I learned, service before self and all the pillars of the Air Force and all that kind of stuff. I think the biggest thing for me was finding out exactly what I could do and what I could accomplish and what my limits were, knowing that the only person that could really ever stop me was me. And if I got out of my own head and just said, I'm doing it, let's go, I could do it. And just understanding that if I just had enough, willingness and, wanting to do something, I could do it and overcome it, no matter what the situation, no matter what the problem, no matter what type of wall was in front of me, I was going to break the crap out of it and, go through it. So I gained a lot of respect for myself, and, it gave me a lot of good stuff. So when times now get hard, I think back to those situations where it was even harder. And I'm like, I overcame that, why can't I do it now? I think that was the biggest thing. I know that's something I'm gonna, once I have a family and all that kind of stuff, definitely gonna pass down. Like, you think you're strong, you can get stronger, and there's no reason to stop. So.
Well, that may have just answered the next one, but what message would you like to leave for future generations who may view this interview?
I guess, wow, that's a big question. That's not that big deal. If I had to say anything, I say it's a personal thing. It has to be something that if you want to do it, you have to understand that it takes a lot. It's going to be hard, and it's going to suck sometimes, and it's going to be rough, and it's not going to be fun, but the things you're doing mean something. And the things you're doing aren't affecting you, maybe not directly, but you don't know how many people that you actually are affecting. My one of my supervisors, he was a tech sergeant, he said, and I'll never forget, he was like, one bullet that you fire hits somebody else. What if it didn't? How do you know that that person in the next year, 2 years, isn't going to take the lives of 50 of your people? And he's like, and you think that's big? He's like, 50, you take 50 people, half of them have a family. So you take 25 and times it by 2. Now you have 75 total. And you take the average of 2 kids per family and times that by 2. And then you times that by 2 for their grandchildren, and that by 2. And he's like, you end up with an astronomical number after 3 generations. And he's like, so you don't know what that bullet could affect, or you don't know what that airdrop that gave them weapons when they were pinned down in the middle of nowhere, what that affects. And just the fact that, having something you believe in and being able to, honor the reason you have the right to do anything you want to do in this country, and being able to, have a statement in that and say, I was a part of the reason why America is the way it is. And I think, especially a lot of people that I know are very, very, very selfish, and they're not mindful of that. They don't think about that stuff. It's them there now. That's it. They don't think about what happened in the past, in history. So, 3 years down the line, once again, Iraq, Afghanistan, that's a history book now. They're not gonna be like, oh my God, all this kind of stuff. And even then, it's my great grandpa was, served in Iraq and Afghanistan. if they even know that, you know? And so for future generations, it's just like, stay aware. You know, actually look into what makes, you know, you have the possibilities you have today. And, you know, respect those people and honor those people as much as you can. Because, you know, even just being a military brat, you know, I still didn't have the respect that I have now until I went in and actually did it myself. You know, and so I recommend, I feel like everyone should experience some type of that. And if you can't, you know, still honor that in some way.
All right. Anything else we haven't discussed? Anything you want to go over?
Closing statement or anything? Anything you got for us? All right.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I think that's all we got.
All right.